I was standing in my backyard in Lexington, Kentucky, admiring the brick smokehouse I just finished building when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clicking against concrete in an aggressive rhythm that could only mean trouble. The smokehouse had taken me 3 months to complete, every weekend spent laying bricks, installing ventilation, and making sure everything was up to code. I'm Warren Jefferson, and I'd moved to this neighborhood in the Ashland Park area just 8 months ago, drawn by the tree-lined streets and what I thought would be a peaceful community. The house itself was a beautiful 1920s bungalow that needed work, but I loved restoring old things. The previous owner had left the property somewhat neglected, but the bones were good. That's when I discovered my passion for smoking meats, something my grandfather had taught me as a kid back in Tennessee. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the morning air like a knife through butter. I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching across my lawn, completely ignoring the stone path I'd carefully laid. She wore a crisp white pantsuit despite it being a Saturday morning, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Ashland Park Homeowners Association, and I need to talk to you about that monstrosity you've built." I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over to meet her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Morning, Patricia. It's a smokehouse. Everything's been built to code, and I've got all the permits." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer glasses. "I don't care what permits you think you have. This is a violation of our HOA regulations regarding outbuildings. You should have submitted your plans to the Architectural Review Board before construction. I'd actually done my homework before buying the house. I checked the HOA bylaws when I moved in. My property is grandfathered in from before the HOA was established in 1998. The previous owner, Mr. Thompson, confirmed it in writing during the sale." Patricia's face turned a shade of red that reminded me of the paprika rub I used on my brisket. "That's preposterous. Every home in this neighborhood falls under HOA jurisdiction." "Not mine," I said, keeping my voice level. "I've got the documentation inside if you'd like to see it. My lawyer looked everything over before I closed." She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "We'll see about that. And another thing, the smoke from whatever you're doing is going to be a nuisance to the neighbors. The smokehouse has a proper ventilation system and chimney. It's all within EPA guidelines for residential use. I'm not running a commercial operation, just smoking meat for personal consumption." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but a car horn honked from the street. She glared at me one more time. "This isn't over, Mr. Jefferson. I'll be bringing this up at the next board meeting, and I'll be watching your property very carefully." With that, she spun on her heel and marched back across my lawn, leaving small divots in the grass where her heels had dug in. I shook my head and went back to work. The smokehouse was beautiful, built from reclaimed brick that matched my house perfectly. The interior had stainless steel racks, temperature controls, and enough space to smoke several briskets, racks of ribs, or whole turkeys at once. I'd even installed a digital monitoring system so I could check the temperature from my phone. My first official smoke was planned for the next weekend. A combination of pork shoulder and beef ribs for a small gathering with my neighbors on either side, both of whom were excited about the project. Over the next few days, I noticed Patricia driving by my house more frequently than seemed normal. Sometimes she'd slow down, crane her neck to look at the smokehouse, and then speed off. My neighbor to the left, Tom Chen, who was a software engineer, came over on Wednesday evening with a 6-pack. "Hey Warren, just wanted to give you a heads up," he said as we sat on my porch. "Patricia's been going door to door trying to drum up complaints about your smokehouse." "Seriously?" I took a sip of beer and sighed. I haven't even used it yet. Tom laughed. Yeah, she came to my door yesterday. Wanted to know if I was concerned about smoke, fire hazards, property values. I told her I thought it was cool and couldn't wait to try your cooking. She did not appreciate that. She seems to think I'm under HOA jurisdiction. Aren't you? Tom looked confused. Nope. My property predates the HOA by about 70 years, and the previous owner never signed on when it was formed. It's all documented. Tom let out a low whistle. Man, that must be driving Patricia crazy. She's used to having control over everything in the neighborhood. Last year, she tried to fine the Martins for painting their front door navy blue instead of black. Said it violated the color scheme guidelines. What happened? They fought it and won. The guidelines said dark colors were acceptable and navy is dark. But Patricia made their lives miserable for months, kept reporting them for every little thing, measuring their grass with a ruler to see if it exceeded the maximum height. This was starting to paint a clearer picture of who I was dealing with. Good to know. Thanks for the warning. The following Saturday arrived, and I was up at 5 in the morning to get the smoker going. I'd seasoned it properly during the week, and now it was time for the real deal. 2 beautiful pork shoulders, rubbed with my grandfather's secret spice mixture, and a rack of beef ribs that I'd been aging in my fridge. The wood I'd chosen was a mix of hickory and apple, which would give the meat a perfect balance of smoky and sweet flavors. By 6, smoke was gently wafting from the chimney, carrying the most incredible aroma across the neighborhood. I was monitoring the temperature, which was holding steady at 225 degrees, when my phone rang. It was my neighbor on the right, Sandra Wallace, a retired teacher who reminded me of my grandmother. Warren, honey, whatever you're cooking smells absolutely divine, she said. I opened my windows just to let the smell in. I laughed. Thanks, Sandra. Should be ready around 4 this afternoon if you want to come over and try some. I'll bring my famous coleslaw, she said. Oh, and I should probably mention that Patricia just drove by twice in the last 10 minutes. She looked furious. Of course she did, I muttered. Thanks for letting me know. I went back to tending the fire, adjusting the vents slightly to maintain the temperature. Smoking meat is an art that requires patience and attention. You can't rush it, can't force it. The meat will tell you when it's done, and you learn to read the signs. My grandfather had spent years teaching me, and those memories were some of my most precious. Around 9 in the morning, I heard a car door slam in front of my house, followed by multiple sets of footsteps. I walked around to the front yard and saw Patricia standing there with 2 other women I didn't recognize, and a man in his 60s wearing what looked like expensive golf clothes. Mr. Jefferson, Patricia said in a voice that dripped with false sweetness. This is the HOA board. Margaret Winters, Susan Hartley, and our treasurer, Robert Lynch, were here for an inspection. I crossed my arms. An inspection of what exactly? Your illegal structure, Patricia said, dropping the sweet tone. We have every right to inspect properties for code violations. No, you don't, I said firmly. Not my property. As I already explained, I'm not under HOA jurisdiction, and even if I was, you'd need to provide proper notice and schedule a mutually agreed upon time. Robert stepped forward. He seemed more reasonable than Patricia. Mr. Jefferson, perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Could we just take a look at your permits and documentation? If everything is in order, we'll leave you alone. I considered this for a moment. These people weren't going away, and maybe showing them the paperwork would end this nonsense. Fine. Wait here. I went inside and grabbed the folder my real estate attorney had prepared. It contained the property survey, the historical documents showing the house's construction in 1924, the deed history, and most importantly, a letter from the law firm that had set up the HOA in 1998 confirming that my property was exempt because Mr. Thompson had refused to join and couldn't be compelled to do so under Kentucky law. I handed the folder to Robert, who opened it and began reading. Patricia tried to look over his shoulder, but he moved away slightly, clearly wanting to review it properly. The others waited in awkward silence while he read through each document carefully. Finally, Robert closed the folder and handed it back to me. Everything appears to be in order. Your property is indeed exempt from HOA oversight. He turned to Patricia. We should go. Patricia's face went through several shades of red before settling on something close to burgundy. That can't be right. Let me see those documents. I've reviewed them, Patricia, Robert said tiredly. They're legitimate. We have no authority here. But the smoke, the smell, it's a nuisance. Patricia was nearly shouting now. It smells amazing, actually, Margaret said quietly. She was a petite woman with gray hair and kind eyes. My husband smokes a turkey every Thanksgiving. I don't see the problem. Patricia whirled on her. The problem, Margaret, is that this sets a precedent. If we allow this, who knows what else people will try to build. But we're not allowing anything, Robert interjected. We have no say in the matter. Now let's go before we're accused of trespassing. As they walked back to their cars, Patricia turned and pointed at me. This isn't over. I'll find something wrong with what you're doing. Fire code, health code, something. I watched them drive away and then called my attorney, Mitchell Harris, to give him a heads up. He listened to my story and chuckled. Sounds like you've got a classic HOA Karen on your hands, he said. Don't worry too much. Your documentation is solid. But if she continues to harass you, keep a log of every interaction. Dates, times, what was said. If it escalates, we might need to pursue a restraining order. You think it'll come to that? With people like Patricia Henderson, it's possible. Some HOA presidents treat their position like a personal fiefdom. They don't handle being told no very well. The rest of the day went smoothly. The meat cooked perfectly, and by 4 o'clock, my backyard was filled with neighbors who'd been drawn by the smell. Tom brought his wife, Linda, and their 2 kids. Sandra came with her coleslaw and homemade rolls. Even a few people I hadn't met yet stopped by to introduce themselves. The pork shoulder was so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork, and the beef ribs had a perfect smoke ring and a bark that crunched beautifully before giving way to succulent meat. Warren, this is incredible, Linda said, going back for seconds. Where did you learn to cook like this? My grandfather, I explained, falling into the familiar story. He ran a small barbecue place in Tennessee, nothing fancy, just a roadside joint. But people would drive from 3 states over to eat his food. He taught me everything from how to select the meat to how to read the fire. Tom raised his beer bottle. Well, thank God Patricia can't shut this down because this is the best barbecue I've ever had, and I lived in Texas for 5 years. Everyone laughed, and the conversation flowed easily. These were good people, the kind of neighbors you wanted. It made Patricia's vendetta seem even more ridiculous. Monday morning, I was getting ready for work. I'm a civil engineer for a firm in downtown Lexington when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Warren Jefferson, the older officer asked. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face that suggested he'd been doing this a long time. My heart sank. That's me. What can I do for you, officers? I'm Officer Mike Davidson, and this is Officer Ray Martinez, he said, gesturing to his partner, a younger Hispanic man who was looking around my property with interest. We received a complaint about illegal smoking activities at this address. For a moment, I was confused. Then it clicked. Let me guess. Patricia Henderson, Officer Davidson's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something, recognition maybe. Madam who filed the complaint expressed concerns about potential fire hazards and possibly illegal modifications to your property. I took a deep breath. Would you like to see my permits and the smokehouse? That would be helpful, Officer Martinez said. I grabbed my folder of documents and led them around to the backyard. The smokehouse stood there, brick and mortar in the morning light, cold now but still impressive. I handed Officer Davidson the folder while Officer Martinez walked around the structure, examining it from all angles. This is beautiful work, Martinez said. Did you build it yourself? I did, I replied. Took about 3 months of weekends. Everything's to code, all properly ventilated, built to fire safety specifications. Officer Davidson was reading through my permits. These all look legitimate. Building permit, electrical for the monitoring system, even a consultation with the fire marshal's office. You really did your homework. I'm a civil engineer, I said. Following regulations is kind of my thing. Martinez was peering at the interior now. What kind of wood do you use? Depends on what I'm smoking. Usually hickory, sometimes apple or cherry for different flavors. This weekend I did pork shoulder and beef ribs with a hickory-apple mix. How did it turn out? Martinez asked, his professional demeanor cracking slightly with genuine interest. I couldn't help but smile. Perfect. Best smoke ring I've ever achieved. The temperature control on this setup is incredible. Officer Davidson closed the folder and handed it back to me. Mr. Jefferson, everything here is completely legal and properly permitted. I don't see any violation. So, what happens now? I asked. We file a report stating no violation was found, Davidson said. But I have to be honest with you. If Miss Henderson is the one who filed this complaint, it probably won't be the last call we get. She's persistent then. Davidson and Martinez exchanged a glance. Without getting into specifics about other calls, Davidson said carefully, let's just say your name isn't the first to come up in connection with HOA complaints in this neighborhood. Martinez pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Listen, my family's originally from Texas and barbecue is serious business to us. Would you be willing to share that recipe? My dad's birthday is coming up and I'd love to try making it. I laughed, the tension breaking. Tell you what, I'll do you one better. I'm planning another smoke in 2 weeks. Why don't you come by with your dad? I'll walk you through the whole process. Martinez's face lit up. Seriously, that would be amazing. Absolutely. Just give me a call a few days before and we'll set it up. After the officers left, I called Mitchell Harris again and told him about the police visit. That's harassment, he said immediately. Filing false police reports because she didn't like the outcome of her inspection. We need to start building a case. I don't want to escalate this into a legal battle if I don't have to, I said. I understand, but Warren, people like Patricia Henderson don't stop on their own. They escalate. Document everything and be prepared to take legal action if necessary. In the meantime, I'm going to send her a cease and desist letter, making it clear that further harassment could result in legal consequences. The cease and desist letter arrived at Patricia's house on Wednesday, according to the tracking information Mitchell provided. Thursday evening, I got a text from Tom. Heads up, Patricia is livid. She was screaming on her phone in her driveway this afternoon, something about lawsuits and lawyers. Friday, I left work early to pick up another batch of meat for the weekend. I'd been asked by several neighbors to do another smoke, and I was planning an even bigger gathering. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Patricia's silver Mercedes parked across the street, and she was sitting in it, watching my house. This was getting creepy. I grabbed my groceries and went inside, making sure to lock the doors. Through my front window, I could see her still sitting there, phone pressed to her ear. She stayed for another 20 minutes before finally driving away. I called Mitchell immediately and told him about the surveillance. "That's it," he said. "I'm filing for a restraining order. This has moved beyond HOA disputes into stalking behavior. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? We need to document everything and prepare the paperwork." Saturday morning, instead of prepping meat, I was sitting in Mitchell's office, going through every interaction I'd had with Patricia. The inspection with the board, the police call, the surveillance. Mitchell typed everything up, and we filed the restraining order request that afternoon. "The hearing will probably be scheduled within 2 weeks," Mitchell explained. "In the meantime, if she comes onto your property or continues to surveil you, call the police immediately." I went home and tried to focus on the positive. I had 40 pounds of brisket to prepare, and about 20 neighbors were coming over Sunday afternoon. I worked into the evening, trimming the meat, applying the rub, and getting everything ready for an early morning start. At 4 in the morning Sunday, I was up and loading the smokehouse. The briskets went in, the temperature stabilized, and soon that beautiful smoke was rolling again. I made myself coffee and settled into a chair on my back porch, watching the sun come up while monitoring the temperature on my phone. Around 8, Sandra called. "Warren, honey, I hate to bother you, but Patricia is back. She's parked down the street with what looks like a camera." I felt my jaw clench. "Thanks, Sandra. I'm calling the police." I dialed 911 and explained the situation, including the restraining order we'd filed. The dispatcher said they'd send someone right away. 10 minutes later, officers Davidson and Martinez pulled up, and I saw a third patrol car park behind Patricia's Mercedes. I watched from my porch as the officers spoke with Patricia. Even from a distance, I could see her animated gestures pointing at my house. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes before she got into her car and drove away, one of the patrol cars following her. Davidson and Martinez came to my door. "Mr. Jefferson," Davidson said. "Miss Henderson claimed she was just parking on a public street, which technically she has a right to do. However, we informed her about the pending restraining order and advised her that surveillance behavior could be used against her in that hearing." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you coming out again." Martinez sniffed the air. "Is that brisket I smell?" I couldn't help but grin. "Yeah, started it at 4 this morning, got about 6 more hours to go." "Man," Martinez said wistfully, "my dad would lose his mind over this setup." "The invitation still stands," I reminded him. "Next weekend if you're interested." "I'm definitely interested," Martinez said. "I'll call you." After they left, I tried to relax and focus on the cook, but Patricia's behavior had rattled me. This was supposed to be a fun hobby, a way to connect with my neighbors and honor my grandfather's memory. Instead, it had turned into a legal battle with a woman who couldn't handle not being in control. The afternoon gathering was a huge success, despite the morning's drama. The brisket turned out perfectly, with a thick bark and meat so tender it melted in your mouth. People brought sides, desserts, and drinks, and my backyard filled with laughter and conversation. Tom had set up a speaker system, and someone started a playlist of classic rock and blues. Around 4 o'clock, a woman I hadn't met before approached me. She was in her 30s, professional-looking, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail. "Warren, I'm Jennifer Martinez, Ray's wife," she said, extending her hand. "Ray couldn't stop talking about your smokehouse and your generosity with the recipe offer. I wanted to stop by and say thank you. His father has been going through some health issues, and having something to look forward to really lifted his spirits." "It's my pleasure," I said sincerely. Food has a way of bringing people together. My grandfather always said that barbecue wasn't just about the meat, it was about community. Ray mentioned you might be free next weekend, Jennifer asked hopefully. Absolutely. Have Ray give me a call and we'll set it up. As the sun began to set and people started heading home, Tom helped me clean up. You know what's funny? He said as we packed up leftover meat. Patricia's little crusade has actually brought the neighborhood together more than any HOA event ever did. People are talking to each other, helping each other out. It's nice. He was right. In the weeks since Patricia had started her campaign against me, I'd gotten to know more neighbors than I had in the previous 6 months. Adversity had created community in a way that forced social events never could. Monday at work, I got a call from Mitchell. Good news and potentially complicated news, he said. The restraining order hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning. That's faster than I expected, which means the judge saw something concerning in the filing. What's the potentially complicated news? Patricia has hired a lawyer. A pretty aggressive one, actually. Darren Walsh. He's known for taking questionable cases and making as much noise as possible. So she's going to fight this hard. It looks that way. But Warren, we have documentation, witness statements from your neighbors and police reports backing up the harassment claims. We're in a strong position. Thursday morning, I took the day off work and met Mitchell at the courthouse. It was an old building in downtown Lexington, all marble and wood paneling, the kind of place that made you feel the weight of the legal system. We sat on a bench outside the courtroom, reviewing our documents when Patricia arrived with her lawyer. Darren Walsh looked exactly like a stereotypical aggressive attorney. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, and a cocky expression that suggested he thought he'd already won. Patricia was dressed conservatively, probably on Walsh's advice, trying to look like a concerned citizen rather than a harassing neighbor. Mr. Harris, Walsh said, approaching us. I think we can resolve this without taking up the court's time. My client is willing to agree to maintain distance if your client dismantles the unpermitted structure. Mitchell didn't even blink. The structure is fully permitted and legal. Your client has no standing to demand its removal, and this hearing isn't about the smokehouse. It's about your client's pattern of harassment. Walsh's smile didn't falter. We'll see what the judge says. Inside the courtroom, Judge Amanda Pierce presided. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that suggested she'd heard every kind of nonsense imaginable and had no patience for it. This is a hearing regarding a petition for a restraining order filed by Warren Jefferson against Patricia Henderson, Judge Pierce began. Mr. Harris, present your case. Mitchell stood and laid out everything methodically. The initial confrontation, the unauthorized inspection attempt, the false police report, and the surveillance behavior. He submitted the police reports, photos of Patricia's car parked outside my house, and written statements from Sandra and Tom. Judge Pierce reviewed each document carefully, occasionally asking questions. When Mitchell finished, she turned to Walsh. Mr. Walsh, your response. Walsh stood with confidence. Your Honor, my client is a concerned member of the community who was exercising her rights as HOA president to investigate potential violations. Mr. Jefferson's structure has caused numerous complaints from neighbors about smoke, smell, and noise. You have documentation of these complaints. Judge Pierce asked, Well, no written complaints, but my client has received verbal complaints. Hearsay, then, Judge Pierce said dryly. Continue. As for the police call, my client genuinely believed there might be a safety issue. When the police determined everything was legal, she accepted that. The restraining order is an overreaction to normal neighborhood oversight. Judge Pierce looked at Patricia. Miss Henderson, Why were you parked outside Mr. Jefferson's home taking photographs last Sunday morning?" Patricia stood, and Walsh tried to gesture for her to let him answer, but she ignored him. "Your Honor, I was documenting the excessive smoke coming from his property. It's a fire hazard and a nuisance. According to the police report, officers found no violations or hazards. They also noted that you were advised about this hearing and chose to continue surveillance anyway. Is that correct?" Patricia's face flushed. "I have a right to park on public streets." "You do," Judge Pierce agreed. "But parking outside someone's home repeatedly to photograph them crosses into harassment, especially when combined with false police reports and admitted surveillance. Mr. Walsh, does your client understand the seriousness of these allegations?" Walsh looked less confident now. "Your Honor, perhaps we were too hasty in our defense strategy. My client is willing to agree to maintain distance." "I'm sure she is now that she's in front of a judge," Pierce said. "Here's my ruling. I'm granting the restraining order. Miss Henderson, you are to maintain a distance of at least 300 feet from Mr. Jefferson and his property at all times, except when traveling on public roads for legitimate purposes. You are not to contact him directly or indirectly, including through third parties. You are not to surveil his property or file any further complaints without substantial, documented evidence of actual violations. Do you understand?" Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. "But I'm the HOA president. My house is in the same neighborhood." "Then I suggest you take different routes and avoid his street," Judge Pierce said. "Furthermore, I'm ordering you to pay Mr. Jefferson's legal fees in relation to this matter. The amount will be determined and submitted within 14 days. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt, which can result in fines and jail time. Am I clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly, finally looking defeated. Outside the courthouse, Mitchell was grinning. "That went even better than I expected. Judge Pierce doesn't tolerate harassment, and Walsh's attempt to justify Patricia's behavior backfired." "So it's over?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "The restraining order is in place for 1 year, renewable if she violates it. As for it being over, that depends on whether Patricia learns her lesson or not." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The legal cloud was lifted, and I could get back to enjoying my hobby without constantly looking over my shoulder. That evening, I called Ray Martinez to confirm our plan for Saturday. "My dad is so excited," Ray said. "He's been talking about it nonstop. He's even written down questions about technique. Tell him to bring those questions. We'll have plenty of time to talk while the meat cooks." Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and cool temperatures ideal for smoking meat. I was up early, getting the smokehouse ready and prepping a massive pork shoulder and a whole beef brisket. Ray arrived at 6 with his father, Carlos, a man in his 70s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. "Mr. Jefferson, thank you so much for this," Carlos said, shaking my hand warmly. "My son says you're the real deal. Please call me Warren." "And it's my pleasure. Your son's been great, and any friend of his is a friend of mine." We spent the morning together, and I walked them through every step. How to select the meat, how to trim it, the art of the rub, the science of temperature control, and the patience required to let the smoke work its magic. Carlos had grown up in San Antonio, where barbecue was a religion, and he shared stories of the pits his father had run. "This reminds me of home," Carlos said as we sat watching the smoke curl from the chimney. "Not just the smell, but the feeling, taking time to do something right, to honor the tradition." Ray looked at his father with visible emotion. "Dad's been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. he explained quietly while Carlos was examining the digital thermometer. "The doctors say staying active and engaged is important. Having projects and things to look forward to helps." I understood then why this meant so much. "Well, Carlos is welcome here anytime, and I'd be honored if you both wanted to help me with future smokes. I'm planning to do a whole pig in a few weeks for a neighborhood block party." By afternoon, when the meat was done, I'd invited Sandra and Tom over to join us. We sat in my backyard, eating incredible barbecue and sharing stories. Carlos told us about growing up in Texas, his immigration story, his years working construction and raising his family. Ray talked about becoming a police officer and the challenges and rewards of the job. Sandra shared her experiences as a teacher, and Tom talked about the tech industry and how it had brought him to Kentucky. This was what my grandfather had meant about barbecue being about community. The food was just the medium for bringing people together, for creating space where stories could be shared and connections made. As Ray and Carlos were leaving, Carlos hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Warren. Not just for the food and the lessons, but for reminding me that good things still happen, that good people still exist." Monday morning, I was back at work when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Jefferson. This is Robert Lynch from the HOA board. We met a few weeks ago." I tensed. "I remember. What can I do for you?" "I want to apologize," he said, surprising me, "for Patricia's behavior and for the board not reining her in sooner. Several of us had concerns about how she was handling things, but we didn't speak up. That was wrong." "I appreciate that," I said cautiously. "There's something else. Patricia resigned as president this morning. The restraining order and legal fees were apparently the final straw. Her husband is furious about the cost and the embarrassment. The board is having an emergency election next week, and I wanted to ask if you'd consider joining the board." That was unexpected. "I'm not under HOA jurisdiction." "I know, but you could serve as an advisory member." "The thing is, we need people who understand that an HOA should serve the community, not control it. Your situation opened a lot of eyes. Several homeowners have come forward with their own stories about Patricia's overreach. We want to reform how the HOA operates, and we could use your perspective." I thought about it for a moment. "Let me consider it and get back to you. That's all I ask. And Warren, that barbecue I smelled from your place those weekends, it smelled amazing." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair thinking. My grandfather had always said that the best revenge was living well and building something positive. Maybe being part of reforming the HOA was a way to do that, to prevent other homeowners from going through what I had. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. I attended an HOA board meeting as an observer and was struck by how differently things operated without Patricia's iron grip. Robert had been elected as the new president, and one of his first acts was proposing amendments to the bylaws that would limit the board's authority and create a proper appeals process for homeowners. I agreed to serve as an advisory member, offering input on construction and code compliance issues. It turned out my background as a civil engineer was valuable, and I was able to help several homeowners navigate legitimate projects without the harassment Patricia had made standard. The neighborhood block party I'd mentioned became a reality in late October. I spent 2 days preparing a whole pig in the Smokehouse, and the turnout was incredible. Over 100 people showed up, including officers Davidson and Martinez, who both brought their families. Carlos and Ray helped me manage the fire and carve the meat, and the three of us had developed a genuine friendship. Sandra organized games for the kids, and Tom set up a sound system. It felt like a real community celebration, the kind of thing that made neighborhoods feel like home. Even some people from surrounding areas showed up after hearing about it, and I found myself explaining the Smokehouse setup to curious strangers at least a dozen times. Around sunset, Robert stood up and made a short speech. "I want to thank Warren Jefferson for hosting this event and for reminding us what community is supposed to look like. This neighborhood is better because he moved here, and I think we all owe him an apology for how he was treated initially." People clapped, and I felt my face heat with embarrassment. I just wanted to smoke some meat and be left alone, but somehow I'd become a catalyst for change in the neighborhood. As winter approached, I continued using the Smokehouse regularly, perfecting different recipes and techniques. Carlos came over most Saturdays, and we'd spend hours tending the fire and talking. His Parkinson's symptoms were progressing slowly, but the activity and friendship seemed to help his spirits. One Saturday in November, Ray pulled me aside. "Warren, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for my dad. He's struggling with the diagnosis, with feeling like his best years are behind him. These Saturdays have given him something to look forward to, a reason to keep learning and growing." "It's been good for me too," I said honestly. "My grandfather passed away 5 years ago, and I've missed having someone to share this with, someone who understands why it matters." Christmas approached, and I decided to do something special. I spent 3 weeks preparing smoked hams, turkeys, and briskets, packaging them up as gifts for my neighbors. On Christmas Eve, I went door to door delivering the packages, and the reactions ranged from surprised delight to tearful gratitude. Sandra hugged me and said it was the best Christmas gift she'd received in years. Tom and his family invited me over for Christmas dinner, not wanting me to spend the holiday alone. It was warm and chaotic with their 2 kids running around, and exactly what I needed. As I sat at their table, sharing a meal with people who'd become genuine friends, I reflected on how much my life had changed in less than a year. In January, I got a call from Mitchell Harris. "Warren, I thought you should know. Patricia Henderson and her husband are selling their house and moving. Word is, the legal fees and the embarrassment were too much. Plus, several other homeowners have filed formal complaints with the board about past harassment, and she's facing potential legal action from them as well." "That's sad, actually," I said, meaning it. I never wanted to ruin her life. I just wanted to be left alone to smoke meat. "People like Patricia do it to themselves," Mitchell said. "She could have walked away at any point, but she kept escalating. Actions have consequences." In February, the house 2 doors down from mine went up for sale, and I learned it had been Patricia's. It sold quickly to a young family with 3 kids who seemed delighted by the neighborhood. The wife, Maria, came over to introduce herself and mentioned that she was a food blogger. "I heard about your smokehouse from, 5 different neighbors," she said excitedly. "Would you ever consider letting me feature it on my blog? I focus on traditional cooking methods and community food culture." I agreed, and her article went viral in foodie circles. Suddenly, I was getting messages from people all over Kentucky and neighboring states asking about my techniques, my setup, and whether I offered classes. I hadn't planned on any of that, but Carlos suggested we could do occasional weekend workshops. Nothing too formal, just sharing knowledge with people who were interested. We started hosting monthly Smokehouse workshops, charging a modest fee that we donated to a Parkinson's Research Foundation. People would come from hours away to spend a Saturday learning the craft, and it became something I looked forward to. Each workshop was different. Each group of people brought their own stories and experiences. One participant was a high school teacher who wanted to start a culinary program at his school. Another was a retired veteran dealing with PTSD who found the slow, meditative process of smoking meat therapeutic. A young woman came who was opening a restaurant and wanted to honor her grandmother's barbecue recipes. Each of them reminded me why this mattered, why food was about so much more than just eating. By spring, a full year after Patricia had first stormed across my lawn, I stood in my backyard preparing for another neighborhood gathering. The smokehouse had weathered beautifully, the brick darkening slightly with smoke and time, giving it character. My yard had become a gathering place, a hub for the community in a way I never imagined when I moved in. Ray and Carlos showed up early to help, and Sandra came over with fresh flowers from her garden to decorate the tables. Tom was setting up speakers, and Maria was documenting everything for another blog post. Robert stopped by to mention that the HOA had officially recognized my property's exempt status in their updated bylaws, and thanked me again for my advisory role. As smoke began to rise from the chimney, carrying the scent of hickory and applewood through the neighborhood, I thought about my grandfather and how proud he would have been. Not just of the barbecue, but of what had grown from it. He'd always said that food cooked with care and shared with love could change lives, could build bridges, could create family where there was none before. A year ago, I'd been a guy who just wanted to build a smokehouse and be left alone. Patricia Henderson's campaign against me had been stressful and frustrating, but in a strange way, it had pushed me to become part of something bigger. It had forced the neighborhood to examine itself, to question the kind of community it wanted to be. The restraining order was still in effect, though Patricia was gone now. The new family in her old house had become good friends, and their kids loved the barbecue. The HOA had reformed itself, becoming an organization that actually served homeowners rather than harassing them. Officers Davidson and Martinez still stopped by occasionally, always claiming it was just to check on things, but really just enjoying the food and company. As the afternoon wore on and my yard filled with neighbors, friends, and a few new faces, I found myself content in a way I hadn't been in years. This was home. Not just the house or the smokehouse or even the neighborhood, but the community that had formed around a simple act of cooking meat slowly over hardwood smoke. Carlos raised his beer bottle in a toast to Warren, who taught an old man new tricks and reminded us all what matters. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt my eyes get a little misty. To community, I said, and to people who understand that the best things in life can't be rushed. The smoke continued to rise into the Kentucky sky, carrying with it the smell of tradition, patience, and love. My grandfather would have been proud. I was proud. And somewhere in the neighborhood, I imagined Patricia Henderson learning her own lessons about community, control, and the importance of letting people live their lives. The smokehouse stood solid and permanent, a testament to following your passion even when others tried to stop you. Every brick had been laid with care, every regulation followed, every permit properly filed. It was legal, it was beautiful, and it was mine. No HOA Karen could take that away, no matter how hard she tried. As the sun set and the gathering continued under string lights Tom had helped me hang, I tended the fire one more time, adjusting the vents and checking the temperature. The digital readout glowed steady at 225 degrees, perfect. The meat would be ready in a few hours, and until then, there was nothing to do but wait, talk, laugh, and enjoy the company of good people. That was the real recipe my grandfather had taught me. Not just the spices and the smoke, but the patience, the care, and the understanding that the best meals are the ones shared with others. Patricia Henderson had called the police about my smokehouse, trying to shut down something she couldn't control. Instead, Officer Martinez had asked for the recipe, and that simple human connection had started something beautiful. I looked around at the faces in my yard, neighbors who'd become friends, strangers who'd become students, a police officer and his father who'd become like family. This was the recipe that mattered, the one worth protecting and sharing. And no HOA regulation, no matter how strictly enforced, could ever replicate it. The smokehouse would stand for years to come. I'd make sure of that. And every time smoke rose from its chimney, it would be a reminder that community isn't something you enforce with rules and regulations. It's something you build one meal at a time, one shared story at a time, one act of kindness at a time. Patricia Henderson had learned that lesson the hard way, and the neighborhood was better for it.